Hey, welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about the Unreal Engine object hierarchy and how this lays the foundation beneath all blueprints that we create. So let's dive in. Now, in Unreal Engine, all of the objects that we'll be creating belong to a hierarchy, with the most basic object types at the top and more complex object types the further down the hierarchy we go. Near the top, we have the actor class. Now, we can create blueprints of the actor type, and actors have certain capabilities. They can be placed in the level. So all of the objects that we see placed in the level are actors. They also have events that we can take advantage of in the blueprint editor. Two of the most important events that belong to the actor are the tick and begin play events. The tick event fires off each frame of the game. As you're playing the game, the image on the screen is being updated many times per second. Depending on your computer hardware, this could be anywhere from 60 frames per second to 120 frames per second. Each frame is a single update of the image on the screen, and the tick event fires off every single frame. So if we want something to happen every frame of the game, we can add blueprint logic and connect it to the tick event, and that logic will be executed every single frame. Now, the begin play event fires off at the beginning of the game or when the actor is spawned in the level. So as soon as we press play, all actors will fire off their begin play events. Actors can also have components. These are more basic types of objects. When we create a character, our character is going to have its own camera and its own mesh, and these will be components that belong to the character. Now, further down the hierarchy, we have the pawn. A pawn is based on the actor class, which means it has all of the capabilities that the actor has. So a pawn can be placed in the level, it has tick and begin play events, and it can have components. Now, in addition to that, a pawn has the ability to be possessed by a controller. A controller is designed to take input from a user, such as pressing a key on the keyboard or moving the mouse around, and the controller can use that input information to manipulate or move the pawn that it has possessed. So we say that controllers possess pawns. And this is the way that Unreal Engine allows us to control any objects in the game. Now, further down the hierarchy, we have the character. And a character is based on a pawn, which means it has all of the functionality that pawns have. So a character can be possessed by a controller. And it also has all of the features that the pawn inherits from the actor. So characters can be placed in the level. They have tick and begin play events, and they can also have their own components, such as a camera and a mesh. Now, a character also has more specific capabilities that the pawn does not have. For one, a character starts off with a particular type of component already on the character, and that's a capsule component. Capsule components are used to handle collision for the character. Usually, the character's mesh is made up of lots and lots of polygons. And for the engine to detect when the character overlaps with something, each of the polygons in the character's mesh must be checked to see if it's overlapping with anything else in the world, and that can be computationally expensive. So the way to make the game more performant is to have a simpler collision volume, such as a capsule shape, which is much cheaper to detect collisions and overlaps with. The character also has something called a character movement component. And a movement component is a special type of component designed for handling the movement functionality for the character. Now, in the Unreal Engine hierarchy, I mentioned that a pawn has all of the features that an actor has. That's because this hierarchy uses a concept known as inheritance. A pawn is said to inherit from the actor. Because the pawn inherits from the actor, we can say that the pawn is an actor. So even though an actor is not a pawn, if a pawn exists in our game, that pawn is also an actor. Now similarly, a character is also a pawn, which means because a pawn is an actor, a character is also an actor. Think of it like a family that has a particular last name. If you have a grandparent with the last name Smith, you typically say that your parent is also a Smith, because they have the same last name. And then when you were born, you were given a new first name, but you still have the last name Smith, so you also are a Smith. For this reason, we often say that the pawn is a child of the actor type and a character is a child of the pawn type. Now, aside from this is-a relationship, there's another type of relationship, the has-a relationship. An actor can have components. Now, the static mesh component is not a child of the actor. It's actually more basic. A component cannot be placed directly in the world. However, an actor can have a static mesh component. Components can be attached to one another, and every actor has at least one component, the root component. So even though a static mesh is not an actor can have a static mesh, and we'll see how this works as well. Now, the inheritance hierarchy is a bit more complicated than I've just shown you. There are multiple types or classes derived from the actor class. We've seen that the pawn is a child of the actor class, inheriting qualities that exist on the actor type, but there are others. There's a type or class called a controller. There's another type called the game mode. And there can be other types that inherit from these classes. For example, there exists a player controller, which inherits all of the qualities that exist on the controller class, yet it also has additional features designed specifically for the character class type. So in this lecture, we learned about the Unreal Engine object hierarchy and how this involves inheritance and how some classes are derived from other classes, inheriting properties from those classes, and how a blueprint can have an is-a relationship where it is another blueprint. For example, a pawn is an actor, and how blueprints can also have this has-a relationship where an actor or pawn or character can have components, but it is not derived from those components. So we're going to get some practice actually putting these blueprint class types to use as we create blueprints throughout this course. And we'll get started in the next lecture where we create our very first blueprint based on the character class. I'll see you soon.